Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Garden Hour. Thank you for participating again in this Tuesday night session, 6 o'clock West River time, 7 p.m. East River time. And of course, it will be taped for those who want to watch it again or want to watch it a little bit later at a convenient time. As was already mentioned, we do have the Q&A button. If you have any questions during this presentation for a particular speaker, or hey, you thought of a question after they finished their little episode, put it up there. We're going to look at the questions and we'll try to answer them all, but we promise we'll answer the ones that are most pertinent, the ones that probably are the most helpful to everyone for this evening. Well, we're going to introduce our panelists for tonight, and I'll start it with myself. My name is John Ball. I'm the Extension Forestry Specialist, and tonight I'm broadcasting from the Rapid City Regional Office, as well as a number of others, including the next one. And Patrick, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Patrick Wagner. I'm the Entomology Field Specialist based out in Rapid City. I got John just right next door, so that's fun. And, today I'm going to be talking about some of the main insect concerns that people are having now, just a few of the major pests that I've been getting questions about. So I'll turn it over to the next person.
And that would be Paul.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Johnson, the Extension Weed Science Coordinator at SDSU. And tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about some problems that we deal with in our lawn. Everybody wants a perfect lawn, but not everybody has it. And so we're going to go through a few things and hopefully deal with some misconceptions about how you can deal with grassy problems in your lawn and make that perfect lawn that you may want. And I will turn it over to Rhoda.
Good evening, everyone. I'm also here out in Rapid City, and tonight I will be talking about strawberries, getting those ready for fruiting this summer. And back to you, John.
All right, well, thank you, Rhoda, and thank you, everybody. By the way, we have another person in the background tonight, and that's Amanda Bachmann, who is our urban entomologist out in Pierre, and she has no speaking part tonight, but she's going to be monitoring the questions, and she will also chime in the chat box. And as always, if there's something she wants to add to the discussion, she will as well. So tonight is bug night. We have myself as an entomologist. We have Patrick as an entomologist. We have Amanda as an entomologist. So, the creepy crawler things used to be called in garden line are beginning to creep and crawl. And if you have questions on anything you're finding, from in your house to in your vegetable gardens to in your trees or lawns, let us know. And of course, we also have our weed specialist, and we have Rhoda, who's a pathologist as well, so she can talk to about the crud part of the bug and crud problem. And I also might add that we're having Christina from McCrory Gardens doing the McCrory Garden Minute at about half past the hour. So at about 7:30, 6:30 Mountain Time, she will chime in as well and let you update a little bit as to what's going on out at McCrory Gardens. But with that, let's really just start jumping into the show. So Amanda is in charge of our slides, so she's going to click my slide up here. And this is my one slide. And I want to start out by saying, too, that right now our season is catching up. It's still a little behind out in the hills. As I was out here today, the birch haven't even started to leaf out and such. But when I take a look at what plants are blooming back in Brookings, we're just about where we should be. The black locusts are just starting to flower, which is very typical for June 1st. The pagoda dogwoods are in bloom, which is also very typical. They've bloomed as early as the middle of May and as late as the middle of June. So it seems like we're kind of right about where we should be. And by the way, the fact that black locusts are beginning to bloom that also coincides with emerald ash borers beginning to fly. And so for all those folks that are in Lincoln County and in Minnehaha County, where we have confirmed emerald ash borer, hopefully if you like your ash tree, it's already been treated this spring, last week or so, or it was treated last year, which means you're safe. The treatments last for 2 years, or you're in the list and they're going to treat it for you this year. But the slide that I'm showing is not emerald ash borer. I discussed that last week. This is actually killing more trees than emerald ash borer is in the state right now, and that is pine wilt disease. Pine wilt disease is a fatal disease on Scots pines and Austrian pines. And it seems to be moving further north. When I first came here 25 years ago or so, it was just at the southern border of Nebraska. And same with Minnesota. It was just entering the lower part of Minnesota below I-90. And then it moved in our state up to about I-90. And then it moved up to 14. And then it's moved up to 212. And it appears to be moving farther north yet again. And the reason I say this is a very serious problem, because when a Scots pine gets this disease, and the disease is caused by a nematode, a small unsegmented roundworm, the tree dies within the year. And so what'll happen is people will notice that their Scots pine looked really nice in the spring at this time of year, but by summer it's starting to fade away. And then by fall, it looks like the picture you see here, that it just has hanging needles. And if you go and break the twigs just snap because the plant has dried out. And then when you cut the tree down, and that's a picture of one cut down in Mitchell earlier this year, you can still see the snow on the ground. You'll find what we call blue stain in there, because the beetle that carries the nematode from tree to tree also will end up carrying this blue stain fungus from tree to tree as well. And right now we're losing more Scots pines in the state to pine wilt than we're losing ash in the state from emerald ash borer. And frankly, if you live anywhere in the state, and I know they should start calling me Dr. Doom instead, but if you live anywhere in the state of South Dakota, you are going to lose your Scots pines and your Austrian pines to this wilt disease, unfortunately. The interesting thing is you will not lose your ponderosa pines, because unlike emerald ash borer, a insect that came from Asia and is fatal to our North American ash, this nematode is native to the United States, and we brought these trees over from Asia and Europe. So it's the same problem, that what we're seeing is an exotic host or an exotic pest. And when you have that combination, trees tend to die fairly quickly. So I know I spend a lot of time on emerald ash borer, and it is big news. But for anyone watching this tonight, I don't care where you live in the state of South Dakota or the surrounding states, quite frankly, this is impacting you either now or fairly soon. And unfortunately, the most effective treatment is when you have an infested tree like this one that I looked at earlier this spring. You cut it down and burn it or dispose of it, because we don't want the insects or the insect that carries the nematode from leaving that tree to another. But I do want to point out this important fact before I move on to questions. And that is, we've had some discussion, concern out there that, oh my gosh, this is going to kill all the ponderosa pines in the Black Hills, where we're talking from right now. It will not. Okay, the nematode does not really harm our North American trees. So your ponderosa pines in your shelter belt, in your yard, in the vast forests out here in the Black Hills are perfectly safe from this. But it's our exotic pines, pines that come from other continents, Austrian and Scots pine being the two most common, that are being killed by this. But again, if you notice your Scots pine turning color this summer, that's not a good thing, not for an evergreen. And the problem is that. Well, Now we'll take a look at some of the questions that we have out there. And I see we have some in the chat box. And I have one in the initial stage of pine wilt disease. The needles turn brown at the tips of the branches and work their way towards the trunk. Quite often that's true. That what will occur is that the needles at the tips, because of course, what's happening is the water's being shut off for this particular problem, that once the water shut off, what's farthest from the water source are going to dry sooner. So that's a good point, that you can see that, and sometimes that occurs in the summer. Now, I will also mention that sometimes what we see is that there are other diseases that affect Scots pines and Austrian pines. Tip blight will affect Austrian pine, for example. It's a fungal disease that is disfiguring but not fatal. What you'll notice for tip blight is the needles on the tip turn brown, but that's it. The tree continues to survive. But with pine wilt, it starts at the tips, and by the end of the summer, all the needles are brown, and literally it's dry to the touch. I thought I saw a question on buckthorn.
Yes, John, there's a question in the chat box. The question is, this person found common buckthorn in their yard. It's listed as an invasive on the internet. Do you recommend destruction of those when found?
Yes, that's an easy question to answer. And thank you, Amanda. Buckthorn is an invasive plant. It was brought over from Europe a long time ago. It was brought to South Dakota from Iowa. John Miller from Huron, I found the original reference in the 1800s, wrote that this would make a wonderful ornamental, and so he brought it in. And unfortunately, it's very invasive. The seeds are spread everywhere. So fortunately, it's relatively easy to kill. Cut it out and just cut it to the ground. It'll sprout, and just cut it back a couple of times. And I've had very good success killing it that way without even the use of herbicide. But yes, nobody wants a buckthorn. With that, since I've only talked about horrible things, I'm at the time now, and I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, who's probably going to talk about horrible insects. But Patrick, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, John. So yeah, I guess, kind of a generic title here, just an insect pest update, but the insects that we see in our gardens kind of change throughout the season. Some of them do stick around, obviously, throughout the summer, and that's a couple of them that we're going to be talking about here. But I'm just going to go over a few different ones that we're getting questions about now. The first one here, this one comes from down in Hot Springs. I've had several other questions from around here in the western half of the state. As we're planting our gardens, that previous picture, that was kind of some of the tomatoes that I planted over the weekend. So that was, a fun spent Memorial Day there of just prepping garden stuff and doing all that. But as the temperatures are warm, we're digging in the soil. People are noticing these little critters, as the one pictured here. And this is from Amy, that she's the secretary down there. And gosh, if all of the insect samples that came through, the pictures were like this, it would make my job so much easier. But she has a microscope. She's not squeamish, and she gets awesome shots like this. This one's a wireworm. So when people are digging in the soil, they're kind of noticing these things, and they're going to be feeding on the roots of the plants and stuff that you're putting in the ground. But normally, I guess you kind of wouldn't notice them, but if you're digging around, you'll kind of see these things showing up. Otherwise, you'll just notice your plants dying and then wonder what's going on. So the larvae, or the wireworms, that's what we call them, and they're going to feed on plant roots and also some of our root crops. So in these pictures here on the left, you can see the adult. So these are called click beetles. They kind of have they can kind of pop, if they land on their backs, they can kind of pop their back so that they'll basically pop up in the air and make an audible clicking noise. That's how they get their name. I'm sure you've probably seen these around, throughout the summer, these click beetles showing up, but the larva or the wireworms is what causes the problems. And we can see this here on this, the sweet potato. And they love, potatoes, carrots, beets are another one that they really like. But they have a multi-year lifespan, so you can have multiple generations within the soil. And they can overwinter as both an adult and a wireworm, so they can live for quite a while. So in terms of management, you want to first off just avoid planting in wet soils. Try to plant in places where it's well drained. Avoid planting your potatoes or carrots and stuff in low spots. Crop rotation, that's a huge one because that's kind of eliminating their food source. They don't really like onions or cucurbits. So if you can, don't plant your carrots in the same spot every year, maybe put some onions in there the next year, and that'll kind of eliminates the food source. They can kind of starve them out that way. Another thing too with management is you can do tillage. So that's great. I guess if you're one of the no-till gardeners, then just kind of avoid that one. But if you have a definite wireworm problem, then tillage certainly helps, because if you can kind of turn that soil over, it'll expose those wireworms, and that'll just expose them to predators. So then you can just kind of till the garden and sit back and drink your whatever beverage and watch the birds just go to town on the wireworms and just eat them all up. So that's one great thing. Another thing is just trapping them in this trap and kill method, which basically you can get like if you have an old potato or something like that, or get some at the store, and you can bury them like a few inches in the soil and then let them sit there for a few days, and then dig them back up. And then you can just, destroy any of the wireworms that infest those, the potato or carrot or whatever that you're using as bait. So on the next slide, we have our next pest that is kind of a thing that's happening now, and that's flea beetles. And this is something that's going to be happening, throughout the whole summer, because they just, it's always really bad in the spring, but as plants get older, they're able to tolerate it a little bit better. But if you see your plants like this, the leaves, they just look like they got hit with a shotgun blast, all these little holes, and some of them kind of have like, they're completely fed through, others not so much, but this is classic flea beetle damage. If you want to go to the next slide, I can kind of show what these guys look like, a little close up. So in the top left, this is what we see kind of more out west, at least what I've seen in my garden and stuff, is these just all black flea beetles. Are really small, only about 1/16 of an inch long. And then on the bottom left, this actually comes from my colleague out in Brookings, and I don't know what that one's feeding on. Looks like a brassica, but this is a striped flea beetle. So you can have either all black, or they can have the white stripes on them. But these things are going to overwinter as adults. They're going to be active in the spring, and then in the summer we have usually at least 2 generations each year. But these things, they'll feed on any of your brassicas, squash, tomatoes. They seem to love my tomatoes. They'll go for potatoes. Even I've seen them on sweet corn as well. But with management here, you can do physical barriers like a floating row cover. The key thing with that is that you want to have those, you want to get the row covers out there early before these things show up, because the goal is to keep the beetles from getting onto the plants. But then the first thing that they're going to do, the overwintering adults, they're going to lay their eggs right at the base of the plants. So then it doesn't matter if you're too late, you put your row cover on, well, the eggs are already in the soil and they'll just hatch out, and they'll say, hey, thanks for putting a roof over our heads. We're just going to keep eating here. So then you can also do trap crops. So you can like radish or alyssum. Radishes work pretty well. Plant those away from the rest of the garden there, so that you can kind of draw some of those flea beetles out away from the plants that you really want. Insecticide applications are really the big way of managing these things. So you can use 7, 8, both of those are labeled for flea beetles. And then pyrethrin, if you're an organic gardener. I haven't used that myself. I can't say how effective it is. In my garden, actually, I use diatomaceous earth. So if you don't know what that product is, basically they're crushed up diatoms. It's like this powder that you can just, you can go to the store and get like a duster bottle. And basically you can just kind of dust this powder on the plants, kind of like you would with 7, but don't lay it on too thick. But this stuff, it works really well. That's what I use. I've had great success the last couple of years with it. And how it works, basically, it just kind of like, it's almost like the insect is walking on like broken glass, and it'll just kind of cut their exoskeleton and they'll kind of bleed out. But it's organic, it works. You do have to do some reapplication with it if it rains, because then it'll just wash it right off. So on to the last one here, just going over 3 big ones here that we're seeing now. And this is the cabbage butterfly. And this is the one I probably hate the most. This is the reason why I guess it's bad. I shouldn't give up, but I've stopped planting broccoli and cabbage because of this pest. But there you go. If your cabbages look like this, just absolutely skeletonized, they have all these holes in them, that is from the cabbage butterfly. These things are also called cabbage whites, or the imported cabbage worm. You can see how they get that cabbage white name because of the butterfly is there. They're a pretty butterfly. They're white, and then they kind of have these the black markings up in the corner and the dots on the wings. But when you see these things fluttering around your garden, there's trouble, because pretty soon there's going to be caterpillars all over the place. So watch your brassicas. That's the main thing they go for. Again, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, all that kind of stuff. The picture on the right there, that was taken by, again, my colleague out in Brookings. That I think those were on kale. I'm not sure what that is, but yeah, he's had lots of issues with them too. But the larvae, these ones in that picture are pretty small, but they can get, up to 1.5 inches long, and they're just going to be around all summer. So you can use physical barriers again to just, keep those butterflies from laying eggs on the plants. But I don't know, I've tried that. And honestly, sometimes I've still had caterpillars in there. I don't know how they could just, flick eggs somewhere and manage to get them close enough to the plants, and the caterpillars find their way the rest of the way. But so physical barriers can work. It's kind of limited. You can do manual removal of the larva. That's kind of what I like to do. I don't know, it's very gratifying to go out there and just, if you have a bucket of soapy water and you can just pluck the things off and watch them drown. I guess if you hate them as much as I do, but if that's not your thing, it's time consuming. You can do repellents. A lot of herb gardens are really good. A lot of herbs are good deterrents of some of these pest insects. Thyme apparently works pretty well for the cabbage butterfly. I haven't tried it, but I have several master gardeners in the area that have used it and say that the thyme works great, planting it around their broccoli or whatever, that it seems to deter them to some degree. And then the other thing here is just insecticide applications. So you can use BT products. That's Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria. And the other one, what I use is spinosad, which it's also another bacteria. It's a soil bacterium that I think the BT it affects their digestive system. The spinosad, I think, is a nerve agent. But again, both are organic options, and they work really great for keeping these caterpillars down. But just kind of keep at it. So I think that's kind of all I had there. Just some quick contact info there. If you need a bug identified, if you're West River, there's my phone number, email, and the office address, so you can drop off a sample if you want. So with that, I don't know if we have time for questions.
There are a couple questions for you. We'll maybe hit one real quick. And then you can type in answers to the other ones while McCrory Minute is happening. But let's go with does using diatomaceous earth for flea beetles adversely impact other soil biology?
Not that I know of. The diatomaceous earth is, I mean, it's a natural substance, and it'll break down pretty quickly. That's, I mean, the thing of like having to, continue to reapply it when it rains, it kind of washes it away, and the stuff kind of just, I mean, I don't know if it does change the soil texture or anything. I guess you'd have to put quite a bit of it on. But no, that's a good question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that one.
Yeah, just take a look in the Q&A when you get a chance.
Very good. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Hello, thank you for handing that over to me. So yeah, I'm just giving you all a little bit of update of what's going on here at McCrory Gardens over here in Brookings. So a couple things starting this week is we have our different youth programs starting actually tomorrow. So we're really excited about that. We have Books in Bloom, which is geared to a little bit the younger ages, 2 and 7. So if you know anybody who wants to kind of come engage with the gardens, hands-on crafts, and for the little ones in Books in Bloom, we also read a book and then have snacks, and it's just a fun way to get in the garden and get outside. And that it happens tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and it's every week through June and July. And you can see some of those topics if it's maybe kind of small on the screen, but you can always call in or check out Facebook has some, and our website, I believe, also has them listed as well for the different topics on each different week. Then in the afternoon, from a little bit older kids, from 1 to 2 p.m., we have kind of the same topics, but we just gear it for a little bit older kids. And so those are going to be some really fun things starting this week that we're really looking forward to. We have our little, all of our stuff kind of getting all prepared. It's been fun to see. We have a little worm craft that they dance. Anyway, it'll be fun. So check that out if you know any kids that might be interested in that. And then we have on Thursday, our June 17th is our pollinators with Dr. Amanda Bachmann here. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. Talk about some of our pollinators. It's kind of kicking off right before Pollinator Week, and we celebrate that kind of leading up to that. And then just some things to mark on your calendar. We are having a Father's Day picnic on June 20th, and garden party is August 6th. So mark your calendars for that tradition. That's really fun. You can go on to the next slide. So then I just wanted to show you a few things that are blooming now, because those are the things that are happening right now. And really, you guys, there's a lot blooming right now. So already we have the American cranberry bushes, or the viburnums. You can see up there in the top photos, and we have irises are blooming. There's some really beautiful iris blooming. The one there in the bottom left with the white and purple kind of frills is the Dutch Iris Beauty Mix, is that type of iris. So yeah, if you want to go on to the next one. We have the ornamental onions. These are one of my favorites. You might actually be able to even see them behind me. This is the Globemaster allium, and I was lucky enough to catch a little bumblebee on it. And so those are blooming, and the bees were buzzing around and loving those. And look at that Shasta Daisy. It was just a pile. It looked like a pile of flowers, like somebody just cut a bunch of flowers and dropped them on the ground. But that's your plant. There's a Shasta Daisy. That's one of the trial ones, the Amazing Daisies Banana Cream 2. So those are part of a program that we evaluate the flowers over 3 years, and those were put in, I think, 2 years ago. And then we have our bush clematis, or clematis integrifolia, blue ribbons. I love this one as well. And another bumblebee. So that was kind of fun. I got to catch a lot of bumblebees today in the flowers. These photos I took today that were blooming here today in the gardens. So then I have one more slide of photo of things that are blooming. We have our blue star, which is up in the top middle, Amsonia taber made in Montana. that's kind of, I don't see that one quite as often, but I really enjoy it. Those little star-like flowers that are blooming right now. And then two other favorites in the bottom left photo together. In the forefront is gas plant. And in the back there's false indigo, the kind of purpley blue color. They're both a couple of my very favorite perennial plants, and they're really, really beautiful right now. And then last, the salvia. That's the Salvia pratensis rose rhapsody. It's just really a really pretty new cultivar. And there's other salvias blooming, and our annual beds are between probably a third and a half put in. So the gardens are really taking shape and looking gorgeous. So a lot going on. Does anybody have any questions about McCrory?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, Christina, but I did want to, since we're talking about garden party in August, do we have a date for Insect Fest this year?
Well, it would be potential. Let me see. I think it's like the 12th, but let me double check it on my calendar. Oh, it'd be the 11th. So that is our plan for that, is that September Saturday. So yeah, and there's our little we got a little dabble into some of the insects that we see here today, but I think those little bumblebees out and about, there's a lot of those out and about to see right now too. So different insects too. All right, well, we hope to see you guys here. Do always call if you have questions, or email. Our phone number to our main desk is 605-688-6707 if you have any questions or about any of the things coming up. So thanks for having me. And I think I'm passing it off to Paul.
Well, good evening, everybody. We're going to talk about some lawn issues here tonight, but to start with, I think I better answer one question. Plateau post-emergence herbicide is listed for control on broken grass in rangelands. Yes. Can it be used in perennial beds? No. Straight answers there. Reason being, Plateau is not labeled for use in lawn and gardens, but also a lot of broadleaf type plants are very susceptible to it. And so in your perennial bed, I'm guessing you would be sacrificing, even if you used it, which is illegal, about half your bed would probably die too. So with that, let's get on to talking about our lawns, because that is one of the things that we get the most questions on. Is everybody likes a nice, pretty lawn, all the same color, everything looking good. We don't want our dandelions in there. And that's in a lot of cases the way it is. However, a lot of the lawn issues come about because of trying to fix the lawn issues. In this particular slide that we are starting with here, I think overall, we would consider this fairly good looking bluegrass and fairly even. However, if you look at the sides and then you look in the center, there was an area that was bare. And so in the center, new bluegrass was added. However, it was a different variety that had been used in the lawn before. And so consequently, it's darker green. Now, in this case, it's going to stay that way all year long. However, a good fertility program can mask the greening or make the rest of it, the lawn, a darker green. And so we consequently will not be seeing that as much. Next slide, please. This also is one that in this case, an area was reseeded in the lawn. And if we look, and especially this time of the year when it's cool and things are growing fast, we can see a lot of that. There's two different areas of growth. About a third of it is taller and about 2 inches taller than what the bluegrass is. And in this particular case, a lawn mix was bought that also had fine fescue in it. And when we are starting out, especially early in the spring, the fine fescue will grow a lot faster than our bluegrass. And so consequently, there's two ways of dealing with this. One, don't plant a mix, plant a straight bluegrass, or you're going to need to mow a lot more often to keep that lawn even, probably every 2 to 3 days. And the fescue will start growing faster. Next slide, Amanda. Here we can see, and this one's a little fuzzy, but on our top part, we have bent grass that has invaded the bluegrass. And let's just go right on to the next one, Amanda, because we can see it a little bit better here. We can see that bent grass is a very fine grass, makes a very beautiful lawn, but when it's mixed in with the bluegrass, the coarseness is very much different, and the bent grass will form spots in the lawn. It usually isn't a full lawn. This is what's seen on some of the golf courses and areas like that. Also, the bent grass has a tendency to winter kill, and so you will see patches with that. Next slide. And then you'll see these patches in the lawn. Now, this could have been maybe where bent grass was. This could have been where somebody had a weed that they were disappointed with, and consequently got the Roundup bottle out and sprayed out an area. Or in this particular case, because this comes from my lawn, I have a hobby of antique tractors, and I had a carburetor that leaked and spilled some gasoline on this lawn. And until that is gone, it is working just like a herbicide. It killed out that spot, and I could put new bluegrass in there and it would not come back because the chemical is still in the soil, and it would kill that new seed as it germinates. So consequently, we've looked at all kinds of perennial problems here in grass, and people say, well, I don't want it, I want to get rid of it. Well, the problem is the only way to get rid of any of these problems are literally to spray out the grass with Roundup, and then wait a couple of weeks and do another spray, and then literally reseed the lawn or look at laying sod. But if you're looking at laying sod, I would even go longer and do a second. I'd go at least a month to make sure all my other grasses had reemerged and were killed so they don't come up in the sod. And so for most people, this is a job that is beyond what they want to do. And so consequently, you either live with it or you look at ways of masking it. Now, just a couple minutes, let's go to the next slide. And here's the critter that everybody can't stand, Mr. Crabgrass. And yes, this is on sidewalk, but it shows what you're going to see in your lawn when it first comes up. You've got this broadleaf and this plant coming from one point, and that is a crabgrass plant. These can be taken care of with crabgrass preventer in the spring, usually about when the lilacs are blooming. So we're getting a little bit late for them now. But then there's also a product called quinclorac that can be used post-emergence if the plant is this small or smaller. But if we go to the next slide, once you have a crabgrass that has already seeded out, like what we are seeing here, you are beyond the point of control of that plant. And also you're already got seed there, and you're going to be going on next year. So if we want to deal with crabgrass, and remember the crabgrass preventers will not do anything to the perennials we talked about. Just crabgrass. Also will deal with sandbur and foxtail, but that's the only grasses. And what the crabgrass preventer does is when these annual grasses germinate, they will then kill that seed as it's germinating, and the plant will never come up. And so I think I'm out of time. Here's my, if you want to email me, you can get a hold of me at SDSU here. And I will now turn it over to Rhoda.
Good evening, everybody. My strawberries are in bloom now, and I'm watching the bees hopefully pollinate them so that we end up with a nice crop. We have a publication on strawberries, so if you have more questions about it, you can, Amanda has put it in the chat box there so that you can find more information. I'll just talk a little bit about establishing strawberries today. I'm not going to talk about renovation because that will happen a little later in the summer, and so we'll talk about that then. Next slide, please. So when you plant strawberries, you want to make sure that the crown is right at ground level. It's kind of like planting trees, only in this case, it's a lot smaller plant that we're looking at. But if we get it too deep, we can end up with crown rot. If it's too shallow, we may get a lot more winter kill. So you want to get that right at ground level. On the left-hand side there, we have what would be the mother plant and the runners. And so you want to plant the mother, and this is particularly for June-bearing strawberry types. You want to have the mother plants about 2 feet apart, because that's going to fill in with the runners over time. And then the rows would be 4 foot apart, which seems pretty wide apart when you're first planting. But then again, over time, that row will fill in with the daughter plants. So allow yourself plenty of room for those daughter plants if you're working with June-bearing strawberries. We have sort of 2 main types of strawberries. One is the June-bearing, which can, depending upon where in the state you are, may start producing in June or may go into July, and they produce their strawberries over that time period, and then by August they're done, and we wait till next year for strawberries again. Those you'll plant 1 year and wait until the 2nd year before you're able to get fruit on it. what a lot of commercial strawberry growers are using now are either day neutral or everbearing, and they're kind of similar. They're not quite the same thing, but they're similar in terms of care. And with those, we get fruit the first year. And so commercially, often those are just planted as an annual crop. They plant them 1 year, fruit them, and then tear them out and replant the following year. They're being used quite a bit in high tunnels under that kind of regimen. Next slide, please. So with the June bearing types, if you've got June bearing strawberries, you want to remove flowers. If you get any, you want to remove those flowers during the whole first year, which is kind of frustrating because you're so eager for that fruit. But the plant will be much healthier if you remove those flowers for that first year and get the plant established. And long about July or so, it's going to start sending out those runners. So during that time period, pay attention to where the runners are, and you can pick them up and reposition them to fill in the bed nicely. So you want to be doing that throughout the summer when you're not getting those strawberries. And so those will overwinter then. Look for a good hardy variety, and we also will mulch them over winter to help protect the crowns. With everbearing, you can actually crop them the first year, as I mentioned. You want to wait until they're a good 5 or 6 fully expanded leaves during that. And once they have that many leaves, the plant is well established. And then you can go ahead and leave those flowers on and let the plant fruit at that point. When it gets warm, over 85 to 90 degrees during the day, usually those flowers will stop forming. So we almost have an early summer, late summer type of crop. Will probably cease during the hottest part of the summer, but they'll restart again in the fall. With these, we want to do the opposite of what we're doing with the June bearing. We want to remove all the runners and keep all that energy into the main plant. You'll have a lot fewer runners to start with, but whatever runners there are, we remove so that the energy stays in the main plant. Everbearing usually are not as long-lived. They will overwinter if you let them. And usually we're looking at replacing those every 3 or 4 years. Whereas a June bearing, if we keep renewing the planting, as we'll mention later on this summer, you can keep those going for long time, number of years. Hopefully we're keeping the weeds out and as well, which also can be kind of a challenge. I don't believe we have any questions.
There aren't any live questions, but we did have one that I know Patrick typed an answer to, but I don't know, Rhoda, if you would also like to weigh in on spotted wing Drosophila, or if we're going to have that as a topic in a future week.
We may come back to that. Spotted wing Drosophila is always an issue, especially with the soft fruit, even though it can get into almost any kind of fruit. Sometimes we can avoid it with the earlier fruiting strawberries, but that's becoming less the case than it used to be. The main issue with, or the main focus with preventing spotted wing Drosophila, which is a little fruit fly, which gets in and lays larvae in your fruit, and it will just totally dissolve the strawberry like overnight. So you'll pick it up and it'll just be mush, and you'll see tiny, tiny little white larvae in, which is really disgusting. But is to pick up any of those fruit. So always keep the strawberries picked. Don't allow any strawberries that rotted on the plant to remain, because they're the larvae for the next generation, and it's only a few days for them to go ahead and produce a new generation. So always very good sanitation with that. And with that, we'll open it up for general questions and discussion.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in too, because we had a question that showed up in chat, and Amanda answered it, and I think several of us can jump in it because I thought it was a great question. And the question was, the person had aphids on their viburnums, and the viburnums, as Christina showed, are in bloom right now. They look gorgeous. But aphids are, of course, sap suckers, and they are causing the leaves to curl. The problem with this is one of the easiest ways to control this is with a systemic insecticide. But you don't want to use a systemic pesticide because they're in bloom. And since it is systemic, you run a good chance of killing pollinators. And so one of the key things is, as we're getting this season, that you got to be very cautious with your pesticide choices when you're looking at flowering plants. I've noticed on a number of labels now, they've taken lindens off them. And the reason why is they don't want a systemic pesticide used on linden trees, since those flowers are particularly attractive to pollinators. So the question then becomes, okay, well, I don't want to kill pollinators, which is good, but I don't want to have my plants look as bad as they do. What can I do? This is where anyone else can certainly chime in, because it's a question we're going to get from a lot of other people, but your choices get very limited. If it was a shrub that is beginning to curl and you don't mind spending a little bit of time, one of the things you want to do is to utilize insecticidal soaps. And those have to be sprayed, and they are contact. It has to hit the aphid. And so one of the things you're going to have to do is make sure that when you apply it, that it actually gets the aphid. So that means spraying the upper side of the leaf and the underside of the leaves. If you only have a shrub or two, that's relatively easy to do. And obviously that's going to have minimal impact on any pollinators or non-target insects. I will say one of the mantras of extension is called read and follow label directions, because regardless whether it's a herbicide, an insecticide, a fungicide, the label is the requirement that must be followed. And one of the things you'll find is that if you want to make sure that the plant is labeled for that particular use, and that the pest is as well. But the other thing I want you to be aware of, and this is why I mentioned it with soaps, is that they'll sometimes say, and don't use it on these plants. And you'll find that with soaps, you'll find that with oils, you'll find that on a number of other insecticides and fungicides, frankly. And the reason for that is if you apply it, you're actually going to end up damaging the plant. They are phytotoxic. So you read the label because it's the law. It was what you must do. And also because it could actually save you from creating a worse problem that you've ended up actually damaging your plant or killing it because you applied something that right on the label said do not apply on plant X because it's phytotoxic. And insecticidal soaps and horticultural oils are probably two of our most common soft touch insecticides, if you will, because we use them because they don't really affect a lot of non-target, that they do have very specific requirements as to temperatures in which to apply them at, plants that are phytotoxic if they're applied to, and the other thing is what they cannot be mixed with, because that will also cause problems as well. Patrick, I'm going to pick on you because you're there, and I'll pick on Amanda for just a moment too. Any thoughts on insecticidal soaps? They're sold very commonly at garden centers and that. Any experience with them or thoughts? And the only thing I will add is About 20 years ago, I failed to read label directions into the phytotoxic, and I managed to damage a mountain ash. So I'm a victim of my own story here. Amanda or Patrick, insecticidal soaps, thoughts?
So I actually have not used them on my plants. I'm that kind of an entomologist that my backyard is kind of anything goes for the critters, because I'm always on the lookout for the predator-prey interactions and just seeing what kind of insects happen. So for me with aphids, I actually let my plants take some of the damage so that I can support the ladybugs, lacewings, and syrphid fly larvae that are in my backyard so that they've got something to eat, because 0 aphids means 0 food for those natural enemies. And we do have a question that just came in on the Q&A about whiteflies that were on a hibiscus last year and they went to tomatoes. I feel that. I've had whiteflies on my tomatoes before. Ideas on how to get rid of them. Yeah, and she says the soaps helped, but not fully. And that is the thing with some of these treatment options, is that aphids can also reproduce very quickly. The aphid has her daughters inside of her and she gives live birth, and her daughter, like those embryos, also have the embryos of the next generation in them. So they're like the nesting dolls. So I do prefer, like you said, John, those soft touch insecticides, because if you really nuke everything, the natural enemies are not going to bounce back and be able to help you at all, but the aphids will bounce back very quickly.
And that's a good point. And that's why I like the soft touches, is they are not the nuclear option. They don't eliminate a pest, but they can reduce a pest below damaging levels, which is what we would like. I mean, let's face it, unless you're Amanda, whose entire landscape's sole purpose is to have as many creepy crawly things in it as possible, most of us want to have fruit we can eat, vegetables we can eat, and flowers we can enjoy. And I think we can have, and I'm just kidding, obviously, man, but I think we can have it all by not saying we're trying to eliminate a certain pest. Yes, you're going to accept some aphids, you're going to see some curl, but it doesn't have to be to the point that it really detracts from the ornamental appearance. And I think we can say the same things with vegetables and fruit. A little damage is acceptable, but no one wants to eat a strawberry and be straining those little Drosophilas out of their teeth. But Amanda makes an excellent point, and that is we've gotten away from the term in control, that we're going to eliminate pests. We use the word management, even that's a little vague. But we're trying to reduce populations, not eliminate populations, for a lot of good reasons. But we certainly want to make sure that people do have fruit they can eat. And as Patrick mentioned, vegetables you can eat. Nobody wants to be straining, except if you like a little extra protein. And you don't want ornamentals that look horrible as well. Well,
I mean, has anyone else accidentally roasted some cabbage whites when they're making kale chips? Because I totally have.
And you know what? They don't bother me. To me, it's cooked, it's protein, but whatever. Well, you know what? On that note, we're kind of getting to the end of tonight's show, and I certainly appreciate our special guests, Patrick from the Black Hills area here, talking about insects, and then Paul O. Johnson, and I say O. Johnson because we have 2 Paul Johnsons at the university, talking to us about weeds. And I actually had to write down his information because crabgrass is a little problem in part of my lawn, and yeah, I'm guilty of not taking care of it right away. So it looks like I still might have a chance of trying to get a patch or 2 out of it. But for everyone watching, I think we did manage to answer all your questions either on the air or off the air. So we've completed that task for this evening. We all hope you'll join in once again next Tuesday night, same time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, for another hour of discussion, sometimes leading as what we're willing to eat, apparently, but talking about the insects and disease problems in your lawns and gardens and the weeds and that. because we certainly all hope that you have a good gardening season. And as I'm sure everyone in the state is happy for, as we had a little rain. So with that, I would like to thank Amanda Bachmann for doing a fine job of handling our questions and commenting, along with her recipe here for insects. Rhoda Burrows, who helps host this along with me. And of course, Christina for talking a little bit about McCrory Gardens. And then our special guests for tonight, Patrick and Paul, for giving us a little bit more insight on vegetable insects and lawn weeds. So with that, we will close for this evening. Thank you very much. Good gardening, everybody. Talk to you next week.